In 1944, a farmhouse in Nebraska could keep milk cold, bread fresh, and a family fed through a week-long storm without a single watt of electricity. Most homes back then had never even seen a power line. And here is the twist. Some of what they did worked better than the appliances humming in your kitchen right now. Number 14 keeps butter fresh for days using nothing but a clay pot and water. And cooling engineers still study why it works. And number 3 cooked a full pot of stew while the family was out in the fields, burning zero fuel after the first 10 minutes. These were not hardships, they were engineering. So before we start, hit that subscribe button, because once you see how they lived, you will never look at your power bill the same way again. Let us count down. Number 25, the sad iron. Before steam irons and thermostats, your great-grandmother pressed every shirt, sheet, and Sunday dress with a solid wedge of cast iron heated right on the wood stove. They called it a sad iron, from an old word meaning solid, and a good household kept 2 or 3 going at once. While one was flattening a collar, the others sat reheating on the stovetop. She would spit on the base to test the heat, listening for that sharp sizzle, and wipe it clean on a scrap of waxed cloth so it glided instead of scorched. A set cost about $1 in 1942 and lasted a lifetime, passed down to daughters. The trick was rhythm, iron and swap, never letting the metal go cold. No cord, no outlet, no waiting for anything to heat up, just heat borrowed from the fire, already burning. Number 24, line drying and sun bleaching. Nobody in 1945 owned a clothes dryer, and they did not want one. Wash day meant hauling everything out to the line strung between 2 posts, and the sun did the rest for free. But there was a secret most people miss today. Housewives laid their whitest linens and diapers directly on the grass in full sun, damp from the rinse water. The ultraviolet light acted as a natural bleach, lifting stains that no soap could touch, while the chlorophyll in the grass helped brighten the cloth. Sheets came off the line smelling of nothing but sunshine and air. A wooden clothespin cost a fraction of a penny, and a strong line could dry a full family wash in an afternoon. We pay for dryer sheets now to fake that scent. Back then it was just Tuesday, and it cost nothing at all. Number 23, the warming brick. Winter nights on a farm were brutal, and bedrooms were never heated. So before bed, your family warmed the sheets with a common brick. All day, a flat fieldstone or brick sat near the back of the wood stove, soaking up heat. At bedtime, they wrapped it in an old flannel shirt or a scrap of wool and tucked it down at the foot of the bed. That stone held its warmth for hours, radiating gentle heat against cold feet long after the fire died down. Some families used a soapstone slab, prized because it held heat even longer and never cracked. Children fought over whose turn it was for the warm brick. A soapstone cost $1 or $2 and lasted generations. We buy heated blankets now that quit the second the power blinks. A warm rock never once failed anybody. Number 22, the reflector oven. Not every home had a proper oven, and even those that did saved fuel by baking at the open hearth. The reflector oven was a bright tin box, open on one side, that stood right in front of the fireplace. Biscuits or a small roast sat on a shelf inside, and the angled tin walls bounced the fire's heat back onto the food from every direction. She would turn the pan halfway through so it browned evenly. No wood was wasted heating an entire iron stove just to bake a dozen biscuits. The tin folded flat for storage and cost about 50 cents. On a cold morning, the smell of biscuits browning at the open fire filled the whole cabin. It was baking stripped down to its purest form, fire, tin, and dough, and it turned out golden every single time. Number 21, sun tea and solar warming. Long before anyone said the word solar energy, farm families were quietly using it. On a hot July afternoon, your grandmother would fill a glass jar with water and tea leaves, screw on the lid, and set it in the yard where the sun hit hardest. By supper, the sun had steeped a full pitcher of tea. No stove, no fuel, no heat, added to an already sweltering kitchen. The same trick warmed wash water. A dark barrel or a black-painted tank left in the sun could give a family lukewarm water for washing up by evening. It was slow, patient work that cost nothing but a little planning. That amber tea poured over ice chipped from the block was the taste of a summer afternoon. We plug in electric kettles now and never once think the sun could do the job for us. Number 20, the pea safe. Long before refrigerators reached the countryside, the pie safe kept food from spoiling and away from flies. It was a tall wooden cabinet with tin door panels, and those panels were punched full of tiny holes in beautiful star and heart patterns. Air flowed through freely, keeping baked goods dry and cool, while the small holes were too fine for a fly to slip through. Your great-grandmother stored pies, bread, cornbread, and leftover biscuits on its shelves, often in the coolest corner of the room or on a shaded porch. The punch tin was decorative and practical at the same time, a quiet kind of craftsmanship. A pie safe cost a few dollars from a local carpenter and lasted for decades. It was ventilation and protection built into one honest piece of furniture, and it asked for nothing but a cool spot to stand. Number 19. The wringer washer and washboard. Wash day was an all-day battle, and the washboard was the front line. Your great-grandmother scrubbed each garment against that ridged glass or zinc surface, working homemade soap deep into the fibers by hand. Then came the wringer, two rollers cranked by hand that squeezed water from the cloth so it would dry faster on the line. The rhythm was steady and relentless. Wet the clothes, scrub, rinse, wring, hang. It built 4 arms of iron. A good washboard cost about a quarter, and a hand wringer a couple of dollars. The water was heated on the stove and reused, wash water first, then rinse. It was grueling, but it was completely independent of any wire or outlet. When the power went out for a week, her laundry still got done because it never depended on the power to begin with. Number 18. Trimming the lamp wick. A kerosene lamp was the heart of every farmhouse evening, and keeping it burning bright was a nightly ritual most people have completely forgotten. If you just lit a lamp and left the wick alone, it smoked, blackened the glass chimney, and gave a dim, flickering light. So every day, your grandmother trimmed the wick, snipping the charred top flat and even, or better yet, rubbing it smooth with a cloth rather than scissors to avoid stray threads. A clean wick and a polished chimney could double the brightness of the same amount of fuel. A gallon of kerosene cost around 15 cents and lit the house for weeks. There was even an old phrase, "Keep your lamps trimmed and burning," that came straight from this chore. A well-tended lamp was steady, golden, and warm, and it never once needed a battery. Number 17. Banking the fire. Here is the trick that meant your family woke up to a warm house and a live fire without ever getting up in the night to feed it. Before bed, your grandfather banked the wood stove. He would rake the glowing coals into a tight pile, then cover them with a layer of ash and close the stove's air damper down almost all the way. Starved of oxygen, those coals smoldered slowly through the night instead of burning out. Come morning, he raked back the ash, added a little kindling, and the fire roared back to life in minutes. No matches, no starting from scratch in the freezing dark. Done right, a single evening's banking kept a stove alive for 8 or 10 hours. It was fire management as a science. Miss it, and you woke to a cold stove and a colder kitchen. Number 16, the cistern and rainwater. Running water in the 1940s countryside often meant one thing: rain you had the sense to catch. Gutters along the roof funneled every storm into a large underground cistern or a barrel at the corner of the house. That soft rainwater was prized, far gentler than hard well water, so it lathered soap beautifully and was perfect for washing hair and clothes. A screen over the intake caught leaves, and the first minute of any rain was often diverted to wash the roof clean before the good water was collected. A family could store hundreds of gallons this way, drawing it up with a small hand pump at the kitchen sink. It cost almost nothing beyond the barrels and a little gutter. Every drop that fell from the sky was treated as the gift it was, because the next rain was never guaranteed. Number 15, the windmill pump. That skeletal steel tower turning lazily against the sky was not decoration. It was the water supply for the entire farm, and it ran on nothing but wind. As the blades spun, they drove a rod up and down inside the well, pumping cold groundwater to the surface and into a storage tank, drop by drop, hour after hour, day and night. As long as the wind blew, and on the plains it almost always did, the family and the livestock had water without lifting a finger. A good windmill cost real money, maybe $100 installed, but it ran for decades with just a little oil in the gears. On still days, the children pumped by hand as a backup. It was clean, silent, endlessly renewable power standing right there in the yard, decades before anyone called it green energy. First pattern break. Here is where it gets clever. Number 14, the Zier pot. This one sounds impossible until you understand the science. Your family could keep butter, greens, and even a little meat cool in the dead of summer using nothing but 2 clay pots and wet sand. A smaller unglazed pot sat nested inside a larger one, and the gap between them was packed with damp sand kept constantly wet. As that moisture evaporated through the porous clay in the dry summer air, it pulled heat out of the inner pot, dropping the temperature inside by 10 or 15 degrees. A wet cloth over the top finished the seal. Cooling engineers still study this exact principle today because evaporation is genuine refrigeration with no moving parts and no fuel. It costs pennies. In a hot, dry climate, that humble clay pot did quietly what a refrigerator does loudly, and it never once needed to be plugged into anything. Number 13, the California cooler. City and farm kitchens alike built a clever cabinet right into the wall, and it worked like a refrigerator with no power at all. The California cooler was a screened cupboard with vents to the cool outside air at the bottom and top. Cold air flowed in low, rose as it warmed, and carried heat out the top, creating a constant gentle draft over the shelves. Positioned on the shaded north wall, it stayed markedly cooler than the rest of the kitchen. Your great-grandmother kept butter, milk, eggs, and vegetables in there, and the screen kept every fly out. It cost nothing beyond the lumber and a bit of window screen, and it ran on physics alone. Warm air rises, cool air sinks. Modern homes sealed themselves shut and forgot this entirely. Back then, the house itself was designed to keep food cold for free. Number 12, the icebox and sawdust. Before the electric refrigerator conquered America, the icebox ruled the kitchen, and the real magic was in how the ice got there in the first place. In winter, men cut thick blocks of ice from frozen ponds and lakes, hauled them to an ice house, and packed them in sawdust. That sawdust was the secret. Its trapped air was such a good insulator that ice cut in January survived deep into the summer without melting. Come warm weather, the Iceman delivered a block to your door, and it sat in the top of the insulated wooden icebox, chilling the food below as it slowly melted into a drip pan. A card in the window told him what size block you needed that day. It was a whole cold chain built on pond ice and wood shavings, and it kept a nation's food fresh long before the first compressor ever hummed. Number 11, the smokehouse. Come butchering time in the fall, a farm family had to make a whole hog last until spring, and the smokehouse was how they did it. That small wooden or stone building held hams, bacon, and sausage. hung from the rafters, while a slow, cool, smoldering fire of hickory or applewood filled it with smoke for days. The smoke did two things at once. It dried the meat and coated it in natural preservative compounds that stopped bacteria cold. Done right, a smoked ham hung safely for a year at room temperature. No refrigeration needed at all. The whole place smelled of wood smoke and salt-cured pork, a smell that meant the family would eat well through the lean months. It took skill to keep the fire low enough to smoke without cooking. But that little smoky shed was, in effect, a pantry that could preserve an entire winter's protein. Number 10. Salt curing and the brine barrel. Salt was the oldest weapon against spoilage, and every farm kitchen in the 1940s had a crock or barrel putting it to work. Fresh pork was packed in coarse salt or submerged in a heavy brine strong enough to float an egg. And that salt drew the moisture right out of the meat, leaving nothing for bacteria to live on. Beef, fish, and pork all went into the barrel to become the salt pork and corned beef that flavored beans and stews all winter. Before cooking, your great-grandmother soaked the meat overnight to draw the salt back out. A sack of curing salt cost mere cents and could preserve 100 pounds of meat. It was chemistry the family understood by feel and by taste, passed down without a single thermometer. That brine barrel in the cellar was a form of food security you could see, smell, and count on. Number 9. Drying on screens. The simplest preservation of all needed nothing but sunshine and patience. When the garden came in all at once, your great-grandmother sliced apples, peaches, corn, and beans thin and laid them out on clean screens or cloth in the full sun. Over a few hot days, the sun and dry air pulled the water out, leaving fruit chewy and sweet and vegetables shrunken and light, both able to keep for a year in a cloth sack. She covered them with cheesecloth against insects and brought them in each night away from the dew. Dried apples became winter pies, and strings of dried beans hung from the rafters, called leather breeches. It cost absolutely nothing but a few clear days. Long before freezers, this was how a family locked the flavor of August away for February, using the biggest free appliance of all, the sky. Number 8. Canning and the mason jar. If any single object let a family eat all winter without power, it was the humble glass mason jar. All summer and fall, your great-grandmother worked over a boiling canner, sealing tomatoes, green beans, peaches, jams, and pickles into jars with rubber rings and metal lids. The heat killed everything that caused spoilage, and the cooling seal locked out air completely, so the food stayed safe on a shelf for a year or more with no cold storage at all. Low-acid vegetables and meats went into a pressure canner, hissing on the stove to reach the higher temperature they needed to be safe. A full pantry of gleaming jars was a family's pride and their insurance. A case of jars cost about $1 and was reused for years. Rows of them, glowing red and gold on cellar shelves, were a whole grocery store the family had grown and sealed themselves. Number 7. Making tallow candles. When the kerosene ran low, or a family wanted to save it, they made their own light from the fat of the animals they raised. After butchering, beef fat was rendered slowly into clean white tallow, and your great-grandmother dipped cotton wicks into it again and again, letting each thin coat harden before the next until a proper candle built up. Others poured the tallow into tin molds with a wick strung down the center. The candles were smoky and soft compared to store-bought wax, but they cost nothing, using a byproduct that would otherwise be wasted. Candle dipping was often a winter evening's work for the whole family, the children helping hang the finished candles to cure. It was light made entirely from within the farm's own resources. Nothing bought, nothing owed, just fat, fiber, and a little patience turned into a warm and steady flame. Number 6. Wood ash and homemade soap. Here is a chore that turned two kinds of trash into something the family could not live without. All winter, the wood ash from the stove was saved in a barrel. Water dripped slowly through it and came out the bottom as lye, a caustic liquid strong enough to make an egg float, which was exactly how she tested it. That lye was cooked together with saved kitchen grease and animal fat in a big iron kettle over an outdoor fire, stirred for hours until it thickened into soap. Poured into a wooden box and cut into bars, it cleaned everything from dishes to hair to the wash. It cost literally nothing, made entirely from ash and fat that would otherwise be thrown out. It was harsh, strong, and effective. A family that could make its own soap from its own waste was, in the truest sense, running itself. Number 5. The churn and the cream separator. Fresh milk was only the beginning of what a farm family made by hand. After milking, the milk sat until the cream rose, or better, went through a hand-cranked cream separator that spun the rich cream off from the skim milk in minutes. That cream went into the butter churn where your great-grandmother worked the dasher up and down or turned the crank for what felt like forever until the cream broke and butter formed in golden lumps. She washed it in cold water, worked in a little salt, and pressed it into molds. The leftover buttermilk went into biscuits and pancakes, and the skim milk fed the hogs. Nothing was wasted, and the whole family ate butter, cream, and cheese that never came from a store. A churn cost a couple of dollars and turned a cow into a dairy. No electricity required at any step. Second pattern break. Here is where the companies come in. Number 4, the kerosene refrigerator. This one surprises people every time because it seems impossible that a flame could make things cold. But in the 1930s and the 40s, farm families who wanted real refrigeration without power lines bought absorption refrigerators that ran on a tiny kerosene flame. Through a clever loop of ammonia and water, the heat of that little flame actually drove a cooling cycle, chilling the box down to true refrigerator temperatures with no compressor and no moving parts to break. Companies like Serval sold them hard to rural America, and they ran silently for decades. Then the power lines arrived, and the electric fridge industry spent millions convincing everyone that a modern kitchen meant an electric one. The flame-powered fridge was quietly buried and forgotten. But out on the farm, a machine that made ice from a lamp flame kept food cold through every storm that ever knocked the wires down. Number 3, the hay box cooker. This is the trick from the intro, and it feels like cheating. Your great-grandmother could cook a full pot of stew, beans, or oatmeal using almost no fuel at all. She brought the pot to a hard boil on the stove for just 10 minutes, then quickly lifted it, still boiling, into a wooden box packed tight with hay, straw, or wool. She buried the pot in the insulation and shut the lid. That trapped heat had nowhere to escape, so the food kept cooking itself slowly for hours while she went out to the fields or the garden. By dinner time, the beans were tender and the stew was rich, all from 10 minutes of fire. They called it a fireless cooker, and it saved precious wood and kept the kitchen from turning into an oven in summer. It was the slow cooker, invented decades early, and it ran on nothing but patience and a box of hay. Number 2, the spring house. If a farm was lucky enough to sit near a cold spring, it had the finest refrigerator nature could offer. Your great-grandparents built a small stone or wood house right over the flowing spring, and that constant cold water hovering near 50 degrees year-round was channeled through a shallow trough inside. Crocks of milk, butter, and cream sat right in the running water, chilled around the clock by the earth itself. The thick walls kept the little building cool, even in the hottest weeks of August, and the sound of trickling water never stopped. Milk stayed sweet for days, and butter stayed firm. It cost nothing to run because the spring never sent a bill and never shut off. Generations of families kept their most precious food safe in that cool, dim, dripping little house, using the simplest idea there is, cold water that flows forever, straight out of the ground. Number 1, and finally, the root cellar. This was the heart of every self-sufficient home, the single most important room a family had, and it ran on nothing but the steady temperature of the earth. Dug into a hillside or beneath the house, the root cellar stayed cool in summer and above, freezing in winter, holding steady around the mid-50s all year long. Down its earthen steps went the entire harvest. Bins of potatoes, carrots buried in damp sand, apples wrapped in paper, onions braided and hung, crocks of kraut, and rows of gleaming can jars lining every wall. Managed with a little ventilation and the right humidity, a good root cellar kept a family in vegetables from October all the way to spring. It was a walk-in pantry, refrigerator, and grocery store combined, dug straight into the ground and powered entirely by the planet. When the whole world lost its lights, the family with a full root cellar simply lit a lamp, walked down the steps, and ate. So there they are, 25 lost tricks that kept American homes alive and thriving long before the power lines ever reached them. Here is my challenge to you. Pick just one this week. Brew a jar of sun tea. Bank your fireplace overnight. Try drying apple slices in the window. Then come back and tell me in the comments, was it a hardship or was it genius? Because I tested a few of these myself, and I will tell you, that sun tea tasted better than anything I have ever made on a stove. Tell me which one your grandparents used. Tell me if anyone out there still has a working root cellar or a real spring house. They did not have power, and somehow they had everything. They knew. Now you know too.